You got guys in one championship now that are elite. They're straight up killers. They're as good as anybody alive, and they fight over in Asia. They just haven't gotten the fanfare and the people behind them like, say, some of the fighters have in the UFC. The UFC is the biggest organization in MMA, period. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you're not a UFC champion, even if you are elite, even if you're fantastic, there's always going to be that thing that's attached to you that you never fought in the UFC.
Which is why I didn't think that would happen, because UFC has progressed so much.
It has, but there's still guys that, for whatever reason, they don't make it over here. ONE FC gives them a bigger contract, because the early days of the UFC, there was a lot of guys doing steroids, and they still passed drug tests because they knew how to cycle off, or when they got to the weigh-in, and they knew what was getting tested for and whatnot. If you're in a sport where everybody's doing it, like if you're in a sport like bodybuilding, which you could say is a sport or not a sport, but, you know, because they're competing just based on the way they look. I think it's still a sport, but it's complicated. If you have a sport like bodybuilding and everyone's doing steroids and you say, I'm not going to do steroids, well, guess what? You're not going to win.
Right.
You're not going to win.
You're not going to be in it.
You can't be Dorian Yates. You can't be Ronnie Coleman. You can't be those guys unless you're taking steroids. That's just the sport. It's like where a lot of sports are right now. Maybe they feel like they can shine over there more. Maybe they have less stringent drug testing, which is a very big factor, an undeniable factor. If you have an organization that doesn't have something like USADA, or people showing up at your doorstep at 6:30 in the morning and waking you out of bed and making you take a piss test and making you take a blood test, then you don't know. If you're just doing a drug test after the weigh-in, that's just an intelligence test. That's just a scientific test. That's like, do you have a good team behind you?
If I thought I wasn't going to get caught, I would take steroids in 2 seconds.
Especially if everybody else was taking it.
Yeah, one thing I've never, whether it's baseball, anything. If you told me I could take a steroid and become the best at what I do, I do it in 2 seconds.
There was camps that had scientists that were involved in the camp. I know this for a fact. There was camps that had doctors who knew exactly what you could take and what you couldn't take and how much to take and when to take it.
Why wouldn't
and when to get it. Why wouldn't you? The rub was that everybody was doing it. And then USADA came along, and you saw physiques melt. You saw dudes who were just like,